Alright, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. It's finally here, the Printrbot Plus. It's now July 16th, backer number 137. At least I got part of my pledge. Just double check, make sure, yep, it is from Printrbot. So, not even opened yet, just got it from USPS. And in their usual fine manner, they have banged the hell out of it. So we'll check out the damage on the outside before we see what sort of wonderful damage is on the inside. Well, that's great too. Alright, so let's pop this open. Let's see what we've got inside with the Printrbot Plus. Nice little sticker that says this side up, which USPS kindly ignored. So first things first, we have our parts list. So hopefully all the parts are here, which I know some people have had issues with, either missing parts or broken parts or mangled parts. So we'll compare that in a bit. Power supply, nice generic one, assuming it works. Our natural ABS freebie. Quality control for happy customers. How about that? I haven't heard about that before. This must be new. Inspected by MD. Printed parts, A kit, bearings bag, heat bed cables, rods, electronics box, power supply, USB cable, laser cut parts, bolts, nuts, etc. bag, ABS spool, motors. Okay. So apparently this is one of the motors sort of strewn about. Let's see if we can get all the motors kind of just sort of in disarray about the box. This looks like the plastics, the printed kit. Just take a quick look at some of this, and some interesting little burns on there, but nothing looks too badly damaged. Some of the holes don't look so great, but we won't know for sure until we actually get into assembly. So again, Printrbot Plus heated print bed and the cables that go with that. Looks to be in decent condition. Nothing mangled or broken there. Giant bag of screws, the belt, nuts, etc. Again, like most people have mentioned, the bags are torn open. So obviously they're using like a U-line heated plastic bag maker, if you will. Basically takes a tube of plastic and you make your own bags from it. Depending on how expensive you went, those things don't always work so great, and that's why you end up with seals that look like this and fall apart during shipping. It certainly explains why everybody's been having problems with that. Okay, looks like we've got all our bearings. This bag actually seems to be fairly intact. Yeah, I got a few zip ties poking out on the edge there, a little sharp, but I guess you can't really help that unless you go real heavy on the bag. So I got a bearings bag. A generic white box. Printer board. And the hot end. The nozzle. This is fairly well packed, so cabling, this all looks to be in good condition. So we'll set that aside. Put that with our motors. USB cable. I know some people had mentioned that they didn't get one with theirs, not that it's a big deal to find one around the house anyway, but it's a nice touch. And as people have mentioned that we just talked about with the bag, there are parts just strewn about inside the box. So we'll see what sort of missing parts we end up with at the end of this. So we got our rods in here. Seem to be pretty well wrapped, so don't expect any damage from these. Got our bearing rods and our threaded rods. Got the thicker ones for the Plus. Looks to be okay. And finally, last thing is the laser cut pieces. And these are all sort of bagged within bags, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to assess these until I actually get them all out and spread out to make sure none of the tabs and slots and stuff are damaged. But again, this bag is sort of semi torn open where the sharp ends of the wood are poking through. So what I'm going to do before I actually assemble mine is I'm going to use something called trans tint, and I'm going to use alcohol-based tinting process to color mine, along with the power tower before I assemble it. So that's going to be the next video that I do, is actually tinting process before I actually attempt to assemble it and document it. But before I go forward with that, I'm going to do a complete inventory of all the parts just to make sure I don't need to contact Brooke and the team to get anything before I start the tinting process and find out I'm missing a piece. Alright, back with a few more thoughts before I do the tinting process. I went ahead and broke open the large laser cut bag just to make sure that I had everything according to this list here in the upper right hand corner where the laser cut parts are. It basically breaks everything down into the 4 sub-assemblies for the extruder mount, the X carriage, the bridge sub-assembly, and the base sub-assembly. Then we actually have the base and the bridge, and then the heated bed holder. So it looks like everything is actually in the box and nothing looks too badly damaged. Some of these were obviously cut on 2 different lasers, and you can definitely tell from the difference between this, the burn marks on here. Compare this one. This is the top portion versus the bottom portion. You can see the actual honeycomb vector cut table marks. This is a sign of too hot of a laser power being used, and obviously no masking, which generally you don't need to use on birch, but when you run your laser real hot, you're going to get these marks from your superheated honeycomb underneath. And since the other parts don't seem to be so badly scorched, I can only assume, well, this one does look a lot like that, so these parts must have been cut on the 2 different lasers during the production time, because they definitely have different scorches and different looks to them. Hopefully I can clean that up with some sanding, and once I tint it and put the ugly part on the inside, then hopefully it won't be too much of a big deal. But it's probably something they should work on, is fine-tuning those power settings and speeds so that you don't end up with stuff like that. Alright, so one more quick thing before we go on to tinting. I wanted to open up the printed parts and take a look at them. And as you can see, part of the extruder here, everything actually looks to be in pretty decent condition compared to some of the parts I've seen. Looks like little bits of Kapton tape on some of it. But if you look at the gears actually seem to be printed fairly well. I don't see any real problems in the larger ones or even in some of the smaller ones. Hopefully this shows up okay on video. It's kind of hard to focus on this little white part. But As you can see, there's a little bit of cleanup that's going to be required in some of the holes. It's got a little bit of garbage, but not a big deal. Let's see. I was expecting a lot worse just from everything that I've read and heard on the forums and on Kickstarter. Obviously the bottom there, but looks pretty clean so far. Also unbagged the motors, got the Z motors and then the rest of the gantry there, so it's probably all I'm going to unbag for now. And then I'm going to go ahead and begin to clean up the sanding. I'm going to do some 320 grit on all these pieces, which is going to take a little bit of time, and then do the tinting process, which I will do a video of that as well for those that are interested, since I've done a few other parts already just to test them out and it's come out really well. So I'm going to do both the printer and the power tower using the same batch of tint, but I will walk you guys through that process as well in the next video.